The galaxy had rules, ancient, immutable laws of physics and power carved over eons by the great elder species. Energy shields had limits. FTL drives required precise corridors. Weapons scaled with terrible predictability. The galactic consensus measured a species' threat level, their tier, by how gracefully they danced within these universal constants. Humanity, the quiet newcomers from a backwater spiral arm, were placed in Tier 7, curious, fragile, and utterly harmless. Their application for a minor trade embassy on the central world of Lyra Prime was considered a formality, a patronizing nod to their quaint ambition. That assessment lasted until the humans arrived. They didn't come in a roaring warship or a shimmering quantum sail vessel. They came in a box, a stark, gray, rectangular prism, devoid of engines, weapon ports, or even visible sensors. It was smaller than a standard cargo pod. It simply appeared, violating the consensus's most sacred traffic lane without a ripple in subspace. When the horrified Lyran traffic controllers finally made contact, the human representative, a Dr. Aristhorn, seemed genuinely puzzled by their panic. Oh, the drive? It's just a simple dimensional fold. We thought it was polite to minimize our wake. Politeness was not the issue. The first rule had been broken before a single human set foot on the station. And as the Lyrans would soon learn, humanity didn't break the rules out of malice. They simply operated from a completely different, utterly terrifying, and incomprehensible instruction manual. The air in the Lyran Prime diplomatic receiving bay was thick with the scent of ozone and sterile anxiety. Senior Liaison Khvor of the Lyran Sovereignty adjusted his iridescent robes, his 4 eyes blinking in a nervous sequence. The monolithic gray box, the human ship, rested silently in the center of the designated landing zone, dwarfed by the elegant, organic curves of the Lyran vessels and the brutalist angularity of the Croshan dreadnoughts nearby. It was an affront to engineering, a silent void of design. A section of the box dissolved without sound or light, becoming an opening. 3 figures stepped out. They were bipedal, and frustratingly simple in their movements. No protective suites, no visible augmentations. The lead human, Dr. Aristhorn, wore a simple dark garment. He was of moderate height, with lines around his eyes that suggested expression, not age-weariness. He carried a small, plain case. Senior Liaison Khvor, Thorn said, his voice translated smoothly by the pin on his chest. Thank you for your welcome. Apologies again for the unexpected arrival vector. Our navigation protocols are still adapting to consensus beacon standards. Khvor es mandibulus clacked politely. A novel approach to spatial transit, Ambassador. One that has caused significant disruption to our scheduling. The Consensus Physics Guild is demanding an immediate briefing. Of course, Thorn nodded, as if asked for the time of day. We're happy to share the basic principles. It's really quite straightforward once you discard the precepts of localized subspace manipulation. Khvor led them through the crystalline corridors of the station. Beings of a dozen species stopped to stare. The humans looked back, their faces open, curious, but devoid of the awe or fear Khvor expected. It was as if they were touring a mildly interesting historical site. The diplomatic summit was already in session, a preliminary meeting of mid-tier species to discuss resource allocations. Khvor had intended to settle the humans in their quarters, but a direct summons from the Chamber of Deliberation came through his implant. The Croshan ambassador, a hulking mass of scarred chitin and cold fury named Grath, had insisted. The chamber was a vast amphitheater. Grath dominated the speaking platform. The utter disregard for foundational law. This dimensional fold is a weapon, a dagger placed at the throat of every travel lane in the consensus. I move for immediate quarantine of a human vessel and species, pending a tier reevaluation to threat level potential. As Thorn entered, a hush fell. Grath swiveled his large, horned head. The Chaos Bringers themselves. Explain your transgression. Thorn placed his case on a vacant delegate's podium. There was no transgression, Ambassador. We followed the coordinates provided. The method is merely efficient. We can demonstrate its harmlessness. Demonstrate, scoffed a slender Telari diplomat, her feathers ruffling. You warp the fabric of local reality and speak of harmlessness? Your power generation alone for such a feat must be catastrophic. Thorn blinked. Power generation? For the fold? It's negligible. The principle is one of geometry, not energy application. Think of space as a sheet of paper. Why travel across the length when you can simply bring the 2 points together? He opened his case. Inside were not weapons, but a series of smooth, palm-sized stones of different colors. May I? With a wary nod from the chamber chair, Thorn took a red stone and a blue stone. He held them a meter apart, point A and point B. Then, to the astonishment of the room, he simply placed the blue stone on top of the red stone. There was no flash, no spatial distortion. They were just together. The fold. No energy expended. Just a repositioning of perspective. A profound silence followed. The Telari physicist, her instruments whirring, whispered, "He didn't teleport it. He didn't move it through space. He changed its location without an intervening path. That's not physics." Grath recovered first, his voice a low growl. "A parlor trick. We speak of starships, not rocks." Thorn shrugged. "Scale is irrelevant to the principle. Our vessel is just a larger stone." He then picked up a small, gray, unassuming cylinder from his case. "But we did not come to debate transit. We came to offer a gesture of goodwill, to contribute to the consensus. This is a standard model for environmental remediation." He placed the cylinder on the floor and tapped its top. It emitted a soft, white hum. It harmonizes disordered molecular structures. A Crochan aide laughed, a sharp, barking sound. "A cleaner? You bring a cleaner to a diplomatic summit." But the Telari scientist was scanning it, her readings growing more frantic. It's targeting the atmospheric pollutants. The residual radiation from the drive, cores, the particulate waste. It's not filtering them. The readings are decreasing. The molecules are coming apart and reforming into stable, inert compounds. Thor nodded. "Essentially, yes. It restores equilibrium. We've used them to clean up radioactive wastelands, chemical spills. It returns matter to a base, non-toxic state." Grath's eyes narrowed. "And what stops such a device from harmonizing the molecules of this chamber, of our very bodies?" "Why would it?" Thorn asked, genuine confusion in his voice. "Your bodies are in a state of exquisite natural equilibrium. The device only targets chaotic, high-entropy bonds. It's programmed to recognize life. It's quite safe." To prove his point, Thorn walked over to the Crochan ambassador's podium, where a ceremonial drink vessel, stained with a potent, corrosive acid that Crochan favored, sat. He held the cylinder near it. The acid residue simply vanished, leaving the cup gleaming. The acid didn't evaporate or get neutralized. It ceased to be acid. The chamber was dead quiet. This was not a weapon. It was something far more unsettling. It was a fundamental rewrite of local reality, performed by a device that looked like a common tool, based on principles they could not even begin to grasp. Their entire understanding of technology was based on force, energy, and control. Humanities seemed to be based on concepts, perspective, and what Thorn kept calling elegant solutions. As the stunned silence stretched, Thorn looked around, a faint, apologetic smile on his face. "We have many such tools. We call them applied post-scarcity constructs. We thought they might be helpful." Kfor, watching from the sidelines, felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's climate control. The humans weren't showing off military might. They were handing out miracles as party favors, and they didn't seem to understand why everyone else was staring at them in terror. The rules weren't just broken. They had never applied to humanity in the first place. And that realization, spreading through the chamber like a cold virus, was far more shocking than any weapon. News of the cleaning stone, as it was cynically dubbed, spread through Lyra Prime's networks at light speed. The human delegation was assigned quarters in the mid-tier embassy sector, a comfortable but secure habitat. Their gray box of a ship sat under an intense, multi-spectral scanner array, revealing nothing. It was just inert matter. Dr. Eris Thorne and his two colleagues, Alara Vance, a materials specialist, and Marcus Wren, a quiet man who seemed to observe everything, went about their duties with polite diligence. They submitted their embassy plans, discussed cultural exchanges, and answered questions with a frankness that was disarming. And with every answer, the gulf of understanding widened. The Consensus Science Guild, a collective of the galaxy's foremost minds, requested a technical demonstration. It was less a request and more a demand, orchestrated by Ambassador Grath. The venue was a shielded lab deep within the station, designed to contain catastrophic reactor failures. Thorne arrived with Alara Vance. Before them was a slab of hyperdense alloy, a material used in dreadnought hulls. Its molecular bonds were reinforced with energy fields, making it virtually impervious to plasma cutters and proton drills. A test of your principles, announced the lead guild scientist, a venerable gelm named Vorlix. Penetrate this slab with a device of equal mass to a standard sidearm. Alara Vance stepped forward. She carried a rod of brushed steel about the length of her forearm. No power source, no emitter. May I? She asked. At Vorlix's nod, she simply touched the tip of the rod to the alloy slab. There was no sound, no flash of heat or light. The rod's tip sank into the ultra-dense metal as if it were soft clay. She moved it gently, carving a perfect, smooth circle. The cutout disc fell to the floor with a dull thud. The edges of the hole in the slab were mirror-smooth, not melted or torn. Vorlix's sensory frills stood rigid. How? You applied no force. You overcame the binding energy fields without interaction. We didn't overcome them, Alara explained, her tone that of a teacher. The fields are part of the material structure. Our tool just asks the molecules in its path to be somewhere else. Temporarily, they comply, then return to their original state once the tool passes. There's no cutting, no breaking of bonds. Just a temporary, localized rearrangement. You are describing teleportation at a quantum level, Vorlix breathed. No, not really. Teleportation implies movement. This is more like convincing a small volume of space that it is currently empty. The scientists were in an uproar. A Croshan engineer demanded a test on a personal shield. Marcus Wren, who had come as an observer, was volunteered. A Croshan sidearm, firing a bolt of superheated plasma, was aimed at him. His personal shield, a standard-issue Croshan model, flared to life. The human didn't raise a weapon. He held up his hand, palm outward. A small, intricate tattoo on his wrist seemed to shimmer. The plasma bolt, which could vaporize titanium, struck an invisible barrier an inch from his palm. But it didn't splash or dissipate. It froze, a perfect, shimmering orb of contained fury, hanging in the air. Then it gently reversed its course, following the exact path it came, and vanished into the muzzle of the Croshan weapon, which sparked and fizzled. The shield isn't a barrier, Marcus said, his voice calm. It's a conceptual mirror. It reflects the intent of harm back to its source. Your weapon was designed to harm, so its function was returned to it. The Croshan warrior stared at his ruined sidearm, then at the unassuming human. The concept was heresy. Technology was not alive. It did not have intent. It functioned. Panic began to seep out of the scientific community and into the political one. Humanity's technology operated on a framework that seemed to bypass cause and effect, energy, and momentum. It was as if they had access to the source code of reality and were editing it with casual keystrokes. Grath and his allies argued for immediate, preemptive action. They are not more powerful, he thundered in a closed security council. They are wrong. Their existence is a flaw in the universe. They must be contained, their knowledge sequestered. But others like Kvor and a few Telari pragmatists saw a different angle. Humanity was offering their tools freely. They seemed to have no concept of scarcity, no drive for dominion. When asked about weapons, Thorne seemed genuinely puzzled. Weapons are inefficient. They create disorder, damage, and require constant maintenance of conflict. Why would we build something whose sole purpose is to undo? It's unesthetic. This philosophical stance was more terrifying to the warlike Crochan than any fleet. A species that viewed violence as inelegant was utterly alien. The crisis point came not from a weapon test, but from a disaster. A Lyran freighter, suffering a catastrophic containment failure in its antiquated fusion drive, sent out a desperate distress call. It was on a collision course with a densely populated agricultural spire. Tugs were too slow. Defense batteries could destroy it, but the debris would rain down and kill millions. It was a tragic, hopeless scenario. The human ship, the gray box, received the distress signal. Without asking for permission or launching any visible craft, it acted. On every view screen on Lyra Prime, the impossible unfolded. The massive, out-of-control freighter, kilometers long, simply stopped. Not abruptly, but as if it had always been at rest. Then, around it, space seemed to fold. It wasn't a wormhole. It was as if the fabric of reality between the freighter and an empty salvage yard 10,000 kilometers away was gently pinched together. The freighter slid from one point to the other in the blink of an eye, arriving in the salvage yard with zero relative velocity. It settled softly onto the docking pads. Then, the gray box projected a focused field at the freighter's failing reactor. The raging plasma storm within didn't explode or get suppressed. It unraveled. The chaotic energy smoothed out, the magnetic field stabilized, and the reactor core settled into a cold, safe, inert state. The entire operation took 7 seconds. No energy signatures, no emissions, no debris, just a problem presented and then resolved. The station-wide silence was absolute. Core, watching from the traffic control hub, understood. Humanity didn't have a faster ship or a bigger gun. They had rendered the very concepts of distance, momentum, and energy crisis optional. The galaxy's rules were not laws to them, but suggestions. And in that moment, the true, unsettling shape of the future became clear. It was not a future of human conquest. It was a future where every certainty the galaxy had built its civilization upon was suddenly, quietly, negotiable. The rescue of the Lyran freighter Starwood Hope was a pivot point. Public sentiment on Lyra Prime, once fearful and suspicious, swung towards awe and desperate curiosity. The humans had saved millions of lives with a casual, effortless display that rewrote the textbooks of physics, engineering, and disaster response. They weren't conquerors, they were cosmic handymen, fixing problems others didn't even know were malleable. This shift terrified the Crochan High Command. Grath's reports grew increasingly frantic. They do not wage war, he transmitted to the Crochan homeworld. They dismiss conflict as a mathematical inefficiency. This is not a higher tier of power. It is a different plane of existence entirely. A plane where our fleets, our weapons, our very concept of strength are irrelevant. They must be forced to reveal a weakness, or we must annihilate them before their philosophy infects the consensus. The Crochan devised a test, a final, unambiguous probe of human capability disguised as a military exercise. They invoked an ancient clause in the consensus security protocols, allowing for a demonstration of defensive assurance. They would simulate an attack on Lyra Prime, and all member species were expected to contribute to the system's defense. It was a legitimate, if aggressive, tactic to see how the humans would react under direct, simulated threat. The exercise was massive. A mock Crochan attack fleet, dozens of drones, and a few decommissioned but functional cruisers would jump in from a staging point. Their target was a dummy beacon near the human embassy sector. The consensus defense forces, including Lyra interceptors and Talari gravity well projectors, would engage. All eyes, however, were on the silent gray human box. Dr. Thorne was formally notified. He received the news with a slight frown. A military exercise? It seems resource-intensive. But we will, of course, comply with consensus protocols and participate in a defensive capacity. As the hours counted down, tension strangled the station. The human delegation went about their business. Alara Vance was cataloging Lyran crystalline art. Marcus Wren was in the station's arboretum, and Thorne was in his quarters, reportedly reading. They showed no signs of preparation. The exercise began. Space tore open as the Croshan drone fleet emerged, weapons hot on training settings. The Lyrans and Telari moved to intercept, their maneuvers crisp, their weapons firing brilliant but harmless pulses of light. The spectacle was designed to be impressive, a show of lethal precision. The human ship did nothing. It sat, a gray monolith against the starfield. Grath, watching from the command center, felt a surge of grim triumph. Finally, a limit. They were observers, not warriors. Their technology was for tricks and cleaning, not for war. He gave a private, encrypted order. One of the decommissioned Croshan cruisers, its weapons supposedly set to simulation mode, flickered. Its main plasma lance, a weapon capable of cracking a continent, powered to full, live capacity. It was a malfunction, a tragic accident. The cruiser turned, its targeting systems painting not the dummy beacon, but the human embassy habitat on Lyra Prime surface. A direct hit would vaporize the entire sector, humans, and thousands of Lyrans alike. Alarms shrieked. The consensus defense commanders screamed abort codes. But the cruiser was locked, its firing sequence imminent. On the surface, in the embassy lounge, Eris Thorne looked up from his data slate. He sighed, a sound of profound disappointment. Oh, that's not in the exercise parameters. He didn't reach for a console. He didn't give an order. He simply focused. In space, three things happened simultaneously. First, the powered-up plasma lance on the Croshan cruiser unfolded. The terrifyingly dense energy contained within its chamber simply, gently, dissipated. It didn't explode. It ceased to be a weapon. The component molecules of the superheated plasma drifted apart like mist in a sunbeam, becoming harmless background radiation. Second, the cruiser itself underwent a transformation. It didn't shatter or melt. From the prow backward, its hardened armor, its weapon housings, its roaring engines began to simplify. The complex alloys reverted to their base ores. The synthetic materials broke down into organic, compostable compounds. The fusion cores cooled into lumps of inert iron and carbon. Within 10 seconds, the kilometer-long warship was a floating, loosely aggregated asteroid of raw materials and biodegradable mesh, drifting harmlessly. Its systems, its power, its threat have been logically and systematically undone. Third, and most chillingly in the command center, Ambassador Grath's personal console, and every console linked to the rogue cruiser's command signal, displayed a single line of text in perfect Croshan glyphs, intent to harm recognized, cause and effect harmonized. The rest of the exercise froze. The drone fleet hung motionless. On every screen, the image of the now primitive husk of the cruiser was stark and undeniable. There had been no explosion, no flashy counterattack. The humans hadn't even defended in a recognizable way. They had, with a quiet and terrifying finality, dismissed the attack. They had reverted a warship to its harmless, pre-industrial state. Thorne's voice came over the general comms, calm and clear. The hostile entity has been neutralized. We have preserved all life signs aboard the vessel. The crew is unharmed, though their environment is now basic. We can assist in their recovery. Shall we consider the exercise concluded? The silence in the command center was a physical weight. Vorlix, the Gelm scientist, whispered what everyone was thinking. They didn't fight the ship. They debated it. And the ship lost. Kor looked at Grath. The Croshan ambassador was not raging. He was pale, his chitinous plates clattering softly in a primal display of dread. He had sought a weakness and found only an abyss. Humanity's response to violence was not escalation. It was a form of cosmic correction. They didn't have a military. They had what appeared to be a universal, undue command for aggression. The message was received not with a roar, but with a silent, universe-altering whisper. In a conflict with humanity, you wouldn't be defeated. You would simply become irrelevant. Your weapons would be persuaded they were not weapons. Your ships would forget they were ships. The Croshan plan to reveal a weakness had instead revealed the terrifying depth of human capability. They didn't shock the galaxy with their power. They horrified it with their profound, effortless transcendence of the very idea of conflict. The exercise was over, and so it seemed was the galactic concept of war as a meaningful endeavor. The aftermath of the demonstration was a silence deeper than space. The husk of the Croshan cruiser was towed to a salvage bay, a monument not to battle, but to absurdity. Its confused, unharmed crew was recovered, speaking of lights that did not blind and a gentle, irresistible sense of unmaking. No one could explain it in terms of physics. The scientists began using words like conceptual manipulation and ontological engineering, but they were just sounds to fill the void of understanding. Ambassador Graff was recalled to the Croshan homeworld. His departure was not a triumphant exit, but a quiet, shameful retreat. The human delegation expressed no gloating, only a reiterated offer to help reconstitute the cruiser's materials into something useful. The offer was politely, nervously declined. Lyra Prime became the center of the galaxy. Every species, from the ancient and reclusive to the newly spacefaring, sent emissaries. They didn't come to threaten or demand. They came to ask. The chamber of deliberation was perpetually full, but the tone had shifted from debate to hesitant inquiry. Dr. Eris Thorne, Elara Vance, and Marcus Wren became perpetual teachers. They held seminars, not in advanced warfare, but in what they called foundational perspective. They spoke not of equations, but of viewpoints. We don't see a rock and a starship as different in kind, Elara explained to a rapt audience, holding up one of her colored stones and a model of a Lyran cutter. Both are arrangements of matter in space-time. One arrangement is just more locally complex than the other. Our tools don't force change. They suggest a more stable, more harmonious arrangement. The universe tends to agree with us. A Talari philosopher asked, but the cruiser, you unmade it. Is that not violence against the concept of the ship itself? Marcus Wren answered, violence implies a breaking, a forcing apart. We didn't break a single bond. We reminded the bonds they could be something else. The ship was a pattern of intense, focused aggression. We offered it a pattern of peaceful rest. It chose rest. He paused. Aggression is a high-energy, unstable state. The universe prefers calm. We just help things along. This was the core of the shock. Humanity's technology was merely applied philosophy. They had somehow mastered the art of persuading reality itself. Their greatest power was not destruction, but an irresistible, benign logic. Kvor, now the permanent liaison to humanity, found himself in Thorne's simply furnished quarters one evening. The human was brewing a fragrant infusion from leaves he'd brought from Earth. Your people, Kvor began, choosing his words carefully, you have rendered our greatest fleets obsolete, our proudest sciences quaint. Yet you ask for nothing. You offer your tools freely. Why? What is your goal? Thorne handed him a warm cup. Goal? That implies a finish line. We don't have one. For a long time on Earth, we were like you. We saw the universe as a hostile place to be conquered, resources to be seized, threats to be eliminated. It was a painful, exhausting way to live. We nearly destroyed ourselves countless times. He sipped his tea. Then, we had what we call the cognitive shift. We stopped asking, how can we beat this problem? And started asking, why is this a problem at all? We looked at a disease not as an invader to kill, but as a system in distress. We looked at scarcity not as a limit, but as a failure of imagination. We stopped trying to build better walls and started wondering why we were in a room with walls to begin with. He gestured to the window, towards the stars. The principles we use, the folds, The harmonizers, the conceptual mirrors, they aren't inventions. They're observations. We just learned to listen to how the universe prefers to be. And it turns out the universe prefers peace, simplicity, and beauty. Fighting against that is what takes immense, wasteful energy. Core, absorb this. So you will persuade the galaxy to be peaceful. Thorn laughed softly. Oh no, that's not our place. We're just sharing a different set of instructions we found. What each species does with them is their own journey. The Croshan, for instance, their path will be difficult. Their entire culture is built on the glory of conflict. Letting that go will feel like death to them. We can't change that. Only they can. In the following cycles, a new pattern emerged. Humans didn't sell weapons or shield tech. They gave away, as open-source gifts, the basic designs for atmospheric harmonizers that could clean a planet's polluted skies in a year. They provided schematics for low-perspective energy generators that drew power from the natural potential between ordered and chaotic states. Essentially, clean, infinite energy from the background noise of reality. At first, species try to weaponize these gifts. The Telari attempted to turn a harmonizer into a field that would calm an enemy's nervous system into docility. The device simply shut off. It recognized a coercive intent. A human engineer explained. It's not a tool for that. It's a tool for healing. This was the final, masterful, and utterly unconscious safeguard of human tech. It resisted malevolence by its very nature. You could not force a harmonizer to harm. You could not convince a full drive to transport a bomb. The technology itself seemed imbued with a benign will, a reflection of the philosophy that birthed it. The galactic consensus did not collapse. It evolved. A new branch of science was founded, applied cosmological ethics. Military budgets were quietly reallocated to exploration and cultural development. The Croshan homeworld entered a period of intense, turbulent civil debate, a cold war of ideology between the old warriors and a growing movement that saw the futile, exhausting cost of their ancient ways. Humanity, granted a permanent seat on the Consensus Council, remained as they were, quiet, polite, and endlessly helpful. They never raised their voices. They never issued threats. They simply existed, a living, breathing proof that every limitation the galaxy had ever accepted was optional. Core, looking at the star charts one evening, understood the true shock wasn't that human tech was powerful. It was that their power revealed a universe that was, at its heart, kind. It was a universe that responded to gentle persuasion over brute force, to cooperation over conflict. The galaxy had been a dark room where everyone was swinging fists. Humanity had simply turned on the light and shown them the door was, and had always been unlocked. The title, Human Tech Shocks the Galaxy, was retired by the historical archives. It was replaced with a more accurate, if less dramatic, one, the human clarification. For they had not conquered. They had merely explained, in the most profound way possible, that the galaxy had been reading the wrong instructions all along. And the most shocking thing of all was how simple, how beautiful, and how endlessly possible the right ones turned out to be.